editor of The Urban Developer, and today I have Reini Otter, the Chief Executive Officer of Frasers Property Industrial. Reini, can you tell me a bit about your role at FPI?
We've got a business which is about 11.5 billion of assets under management. We operate in 5 countries. We've got 3 business units, and we've got about 300 people. So my role is really lots about people, strategy, profitability, and growing the business.
And I noted that you've been there for about 25 years or so now.
Yeah.
I imagine the business has evolved significantly and industrial's probably changed a lot too. Can you talk me through, I guess, what you've seen over the course of that 25 or so years?
Sure, just getting over the shock of a quarter of a century in one company. Industrial has changed a lot. When I first started in the mid to late 90s, they were very simple buildings. I think what you've seen now is that industrial has really grown into a international asset class. And I think the latest data has about 20 to 25% of institutional capital globally invested in the sector. So with that comes a lot of scrutiny and a lot of potential in the business. And I see the sector really as a proxy for technology and consumer preferences, and that plays out in lots of different ways through the sector.
Very interesting. It's traditionally been a very much the poor cousin compared to residential and office and retail to a lesser extent, but industrial's really hit its straps lately. It's the darling of the property industry. Can you give me an idea as to what your view is? How long can that last and where it's headed? Will it continue to be a strong performing asset?
First of all, take offence to that question. I've been in industrial a long time, and there has been, in some groups, the differing view. But what I really like about industrial is that it is intrinsically linked to how the economy functions. And so if the question really is about how long can this growth in industrial last, I think we're just getting started. I touched on before about technology and consumer preferences. If we just look at how the sector evolved, starting in around the early 2000s, where you had new technology come into being which enabled tracking of goods and much larger warehouses to be managed. And that meant that you went from small sizes of 5,000 to 10,000 square metres to 20,000, 30,000 square metres, and now it's 250,000 square metres plus, and it's evolved. You also then say technology, e-commerce, consumer preferences, where warehouses are, what do they actually serve, the communities they serve, and the flow of goods, and you get all different types of warehouses. The fantastic thing too is that as the cities evolve, then the supply chains need to evolve as well. And everything that you tend to touch as a consumer comes through a warehouse at some point, generally, especially in a country like Australia. And every city's different, so it's continuing to evolve, and the sector needs to evolve to meet those needs. So I think that whilst we have had enormous growth, especially over the last 5 years, that the next 5 to 10 years especially is extremely promising for the sector.
I'm interested in understanding a bit more about that sustainability journey. I know you guys started it over a decade ago, and you got the first 6-star Green Star rating on one of your projects not that long ago. Why did Frasers go down this path, and where is it going?
Our sustainability journey started a long time ago. For example, the Green Building Council in Australia started in around 2002. Our CEO at the time, Brendan Crotty, was the founding chairman, and the Green Building Council was really established to develop an independent rating tool and to focus on the economics of green building. So right from the start, we had a vested interest in saying, how do we make sure that what we develop at that stage as Australand, regardless of what sector it was, in a responsible way, but underpinned by a really solid business case. We then were heavily involved in developing the first industrial rating tool for Green Building Council. So yes, we've recently had the first 6-star Green Star community rating, and a lot of firsts along the way. The first tool, the first 5-star, the first 6-star. For us, it's really about how do we make sure that our assets are future-proof, but importantly, how do we make sure that our assets continue to deliver value for our occupiers, but also for the business? And we joke internally that industrial, you sort of said industrial may not be well suited for sustainability, but we've got 2 of the best raw materials, if you like, for sustainable buildings. We've got access to sunshine and enormous amounts of roof space. So we're heavily focused on renewable energy and how we can ensure that that becomes a key part of our offering, and it is in what we're doing. But sustainability goes beyond resources. You know, I mean, we started putting in smart meters to track resources a long time ago, and that was really a play on the data that we could get for it. If we could understand how our occupiers and our customers were actually using power and water and where it was going, then could we actually put some smarts around that to help them reduce their consumption or do it in a better way? And that's played out really well. But it also goes to the occupier's experience, and we take our responsibility as developers of the built environment very seriously. We know that it impacts the communities, the built environment, but also the people who work there. So we have always said that our customers, our occupiers, measure their profit, if you're a 3PL, on cents per pallet per week. But we also wanted, and no one comes to us unless they want to improve efficiencies, because we are very much a utility building. But we don't just want to meet that expectation. We want to play a part in improving the health and well-being of the people who actually work in the facilities as well.
Let's switch gears a bit and talk about, I guess, the outlook for industrial. You have a significant pipeline of work underway at the moment, and then you've also been land banking over the past few years. Can you talk me through, I guess, what's in store for FPI and your outlook for the future of industrial? No, sure. You're right. We have the land bank at the moment. We're about 3 million square metres. Our current development pipeline is about 1.2 billion square metres, so we are a significant developer and owner. I think if I was to sum it up in one word, it's promising and robust. You know, the drivers of industrial are, whilst supply chains are complicated, the drivers are relatively simple. Population growth. As long as we continue to grow, and Australia's fortunate we do have strong population growth, then we will need more warehousing. As long as the companies in the supply chain want to improve efficiencies, then they'll look to upgrade their facilities, which again plays to us. And there's an interesting statistic. We actually, as the Property Council of Australia's Industrial Roundtable, when I was chair of that organisation last year, we commissioned Oxford Economics to do a study. And the study was looking at what is the total value of goods that flows through institutional grade facilities in Australia. And where we landed was in 2023, the value of those goods was 1.2 trillion. So if you put that in context, that's over a third of all household consumption. So what that means is that the importance of the industrial property sector to the economy is enormous. And what we saw, back to one of your first questions about the evolution of industrial, industrial went from, it's almost like you can look at it pre-COVID and post-COVID. So pre-COVID, people kind of knew it was there, didn't really pay much attention to it, and e-commerce was, we knew about e-commerce and it was all happening. But it went really largely unrecognised for the contribution that it makes and the impact it has on the functioning of our cities. All of a sudden, everybody's in lockdown with COVID, right? And so you're jumping online, and the demand for warehouses just exploded. And same with the frontline workers, getting back to healthy heads in trucks and sheds. You know, people started to appreciate the delivery drivers. You start to appreciate the people that are actually picking and packing the shelves in warehouses, right? They become important workers, frontline workers they were called. And likewise, industrial started to be seen as critical social infrastructure because it keeps the economy moving. So the focus that gave the sector was fantastic, and I think it's continued. And I think as supply chains become more complex, whether it's deglobalisation, globalisation, just in time, just in case, it all kind of feeds back to demand. And if you're an asset creator like we are, which means that we target land in the best locations, and we're willing to take a mid-term view. So we don't, the work we've done in Australia, for example, with the land bank, and Germany to a certain extent, where we're looking at sort of that 3 to 5 year play, we're willing to take a position a little bit ahead of the market because we know how those dynamics will play out. So we've spent a lot of time on how we design the facilities. And that plays out not just at an individual building level, but also at an estate level. And so there's elements we try to incorporate into the estates. We call them premium estates now. So we're also, in Australia, a very strong supporter of Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. And this is an organisation that started a few years ago, just before COVID. And it's an alliance, if you like, of
lots of the major players in the warehousing, transport and logistics sectors, and the chair is Paul Graham, the CEO of Australia Post. And the organisation exists to address the mental health issues in the sector. And depending on which data you look at, it's between 40 and 50% of the people in the sector have some experience with mental health, and suicide is the third leading cause of death. So it's terrible statistics.
Yeah, that's significant.
It is, yeah. And we took the view that, well, look, we are a part of that value chain, if you like, a small part albeit. But if we can make a contribution in the built environment part, then it's a great thing to do. So when we were introduced to this organisation, we jumped on board straight away. The property sector is now one of the biggest supporters of healthy heads in trucks and sheds. And my view is when it comes to sustainability, whether it's renewable energy or carbon neutral or mental health, it really is like the new safety. There's no IP in safety regardless of what sector you're in. Just like I think there's no IP in mental health or decarbonisation. If you've got some form of competitive advantage, you think, in low carbon concrete, for example, or steel, it's really going to last one job. So, and industrial buildings on a scale of 1 to 10 aren't at 10 on complexity, if you like. There's, concrete, steel and a few other bits in between. So if we can influence those outcomes to improve overall, then we definitely will.
Are there any emerging markets that you're looking to as part of the FPI expansion? You're very much East Coast focused in Australia, and then you're in a few other nations in Europe.
Yeah. We are, because we're part of Fraser's Property Limited, which is a 40-odd billion of assets under management. And the way that industrial operates is very much in a coordinated manner. So we have another large business in Thailand, the largest industrial business in Thailand, and we've got a very strong business in Vietnam, both in the south and the north. So we coordinate that, and what we're aiming to build is a network effect, and we find that with our very strong relationships with our customer network, both in Australia and Europe, and now in Southeast Asia, that those factors are playing out in a really promising way, and we see a really strong potential coming out of the whole China Plus One shift, which is not about exiting China, it's just about building a more robust supply chain and having some redundancy there. And the three markets that we're in, actually, Thailand, Vietnam and Indonesia, are very, very strong players in that thematic.
And can you talk me through, I guess, what separates or differentiates you from others in market? What's the FPI point of difference?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I think fundamentally we are asset creators. So we look to create value long term. We've been very successful at that in Australia over a long period of time. As long as I've been here, so 25 years, we have always been in the top 2 or 3 developers in the country. And we do that by making sure that we understand deeply the markets we're in, and we marry that with a very strong understanding of what our customers need as well. And you marry those two together, and it allows you to move a little bit ahead of the market. That's exactly the same approach we're taking in Europe. In Germany and the Netherlands, they're the 2 biggest markets in Western Europe, about 135 million square metres, I think, of industrial facilities. And our approach there really is, whilst we're nowhere near as large, we're very much a niche player, it's taking that same expertise and that same approach and applying it in those markets. And if we call, what we call that internally is customer centricity and sustainability, and we're aiming to build high quality, sustainable facilities to serve the communities that we're in. And that combination, I think, of being big enough to make a difference but small enough to have those great relationships has served us well over the past 25 years, and I think it will over the next 25 as well.
Fraser's is celebrating 100 years. It's a big milestone. What's your feel for the next 100 years? Where is FPI headed for the next 100 years?
Like, I'm really excited about the future. I think generally, if you think about what it's like to be alive now, it's incredible. Not just you've got the exponential growth of AI, you've got the electrification of everything. Technology advancements, whether it's 5G, 6G, who knows what's going to come. That's going to play out in all sorts of ways, and I'm really hopeful and optimistic that whether it's the green energy transition or any of the other trends, that it's going to lead to more opportunities than downsides, and we'll find a way to make sure that delivers not just fantastic productivity benefits, but an improved standard of living for the communities that we operate in. But for industrial, I think if I look at the future of industrial, what won't change is that location will be absolutely critical. Our cities are going to grow, which means if you hold assets in good locations now, they're only going to get better over the next 100 years. Likewise, our consumer preferences are going to get more extreme, right? Like at the moment, in Australia, lots of the big players are now moving to same-day delivery. In the States and parts of Europe, it's within an hour or 2 hours. That's going to happen here. That's going to mean that you're going to need more types of distribution networks coming through. And I think what industrial will do, it will become much more about an integrated industrial infrastructure, if you like. So just like the energy transition is going to demand more of a distributed network of production, I think you'll start to see industrial playing a part in that. Industrial will play a part in food production as well. It'll be about how do you break down goods and deliver within an hour. So the cities will change. You won't just have the large standalone estates on the edge of the cities, which are critical and they'll remain critical. You'll have much more nuance about how those goods get to people. So they'll have to be integrated as opposed to standalone, but all connected. And then how you track the goods and then how you monitor the goods and how you deliver them. So you'll have this ecosystem driven by technology around how we actually live. So the exciting thing if you're in the industrial sector is that whilst we're critical now, it's only going to get more so into the future. So I'm not sure what it'll look like in 100 years. I can pretty much guarantee I won't be doing this in 100 years. But it's a very, very exciting time.
Yeah, there's certainly some great thematics underpinning it. Well, the future's looking bright for Fraser's Property Industrial. Thanks so much for your time, Reini.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Good on you.